All right, well, let's get started. Just really so glad to have everybody here. I hope everyone can hear me. Maybe just get a quick virtual thumbs up in the chat that everything's good on the audio end if you can hear me. So I'll take that as a yes. Let's see. Yep, great. Thanks so much, Ali, Margot, etc. Anyway, if you haven't already, read through some of the things in the chat around what is making folks happy. A couple cool things. Jim is in DC teaching his 15-year-old to drive. So if you're in the DMV area, stay off the roads. Congratulations, Jim. Jackie in Baltimore has a new personal trainer. So good luck with that. Those are important steps. Randy is pumped that the Eagles are 3-0. Someone else is pumped that Penn State is 4-0. Go Nittany Lions. Congratulations. Rebecca in Venice, Florida is getting ready for hurricane. And so I actually in the process of considering moving to Miami and also watching this hurricane unfold and that's all sort of factoring in. Danny just hit 4 miles for the first time running in a while, which is pretty awesome. So congratulations, Danny. Francis caught a 42-inch muskie, which sounds exciting. I don't know what a muskie is. I'm assuming this is a fish. So if anyone knows what a muskie is, please enter that in the chat because this is new to me. But assuming it's a fish, thanks, Sharon. Congratulations on your 42-inch muskie. And then, I think Julie at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago speaks for all of us, where she's just happy. Fall is here for Shirley. It's turtleneck weather. I see everyone sort of like really, I'm in New York right now, rolling out their sweaters, their scarves, all that really cool gear that was too hot during summer. So excited to have you all here. We are going to talk about what I think is one of the most undervalued, under-resourced, underappreciated parts of fundraising, wildly important, potentially much more important even than donor acquisition. And that is stewarding your donors. And we're going to particularly talk about, your planned giving donors, your major donors, the real big ones. But a lot of these lessons will apply to everybody who's donated. So just naming that, but we just think this is wildly important, which is why we put a ton of effort in. My colleagues Lauren, my colleagues June, some other people put a lot of work in here. So I just want to shout them out before we get started. Some basic housekeeping stuff. CFRE approved as usual. So this is good for 1 credit. We'll drop a link to the survey if this is your first time at the end of the session, and just make a small note that says, hey, I was here, and we'll back you up in case you ever get audited. So that's there for you. It's also a bunch of work getting these certified. So thank you, June and team, for making this work. We do it for all of you, and super excited. Here's the agenda. I'm not going to read it out loud. We're going to really talk about what are the big trends. How is stewardship different now than it was 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And what should you actually do about it? And then we'll share a couple of really cool ideas from you all, which really delighted that we got those. Small other housekeeping note, as usual, this is the recording, and the slides will be sent around after the fact. Oh, one other small thing. Let me see if I can do this. There should be an avenue. I'm just trying to live transcript. So I have enabled live transcript. We're going to start doing this a bit more. This means that if you are hard of hearing, you can use this, and it will real-time close caption. Some of it will be sometimes a little bit off, but generally it's pretty good. If you are like me and it's wildly distracting, you can also not view it. So up to you. Feel free to play with that over time. So it's very, very impressive technology. Okay, introductions. I have met so many of you, delighted to be the co-founder and co-CEO of FreeWill alongside my wonderful co-founder, Jenny, pictured here. And we are super delighted to work alongside what is now more than 210 people, I think, and have generated more than or nearly $7 billion for charity in gifts and commitments. So this is us. We work super hard to make the lives of nonprofit fundraisers who are trying to get some of these big transformative gifts a little bit easier. That's what we do. And then before we get started, last thing is we really are just intensely grateful that you are here. And one way we get to show that is as many sessions as we can. We send a bunch of books as a thank you, some of our favorite books This is a book by someone named Bento Leal, the third, in fact, as you can see on there. And this is around effective communication. So as you can see, the subtitle is in love and life and work and anywhere. And so this is sort of helps you be thoughtful about the communication that you have with your donors. Now, it may also be useful with your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whomever, or your kids or your parents who you are having a testy relationship with at the moment or whatever, or that coworker who just doesn't seem to get it, right? And so we're really happy to share this. Again, similar to the CFRE credits, what you do here is just make a note in the survey if you'd like a chance to get a copy and just tell us where to send it. Okay, so a bunch of things to start with, but let's dive into it. First, we asked how your week is going, and you can see we're sort of trending a little bit steady from last week. A little bit more anxiety coming up. I assume that part of that is folks in the Southeast with impending storms. Hurricane season's actually been a lot later starting than usual, but also just other news. Stock markets took a dive before picking back up a little bit today. Over the past week, we strongly encourage you not to read too much into the day-to-day trends in the stock market. Financial reporters have to write every day, and so all this stuff tends to be bigger news, but really zooming out is important. Also, we asked you about how confident you are on hitting your goals this year. We do see a little bit of a tick down after last week's really sharp upswing, and so just naming that. If you're feeling a little bit more uncertain than you were last week or 2 weeks ago, you're not alone here. So there's some more stuff. Okay, why stewardship matters. So we're going to dive in on stewardship. First things first, let's align on stewardship. What do we mean? It's the relationship building process after someone makes a gift, right? So that's when we're talking about stewardship, there's a lot of different things. When someone makes a gift, or in some cases when they make a commitment to make a gift. So we'll be talking about this specifically for things like plan givers, major givers. Major givers means big givers of stock, gifts from retirement accounts, donor advised funds, and then large cash gifts, obviously. So this is what we're talking about. But again, a lot of the lessons are going to be applicable for your $2 donors and your $2 million donors. Stewardship, really important, begins the moment the gift is made, not a year later, which is a common mistake. And then this is a really important sort of meta point that I want everyone to take away from here if you forget everything else. In many ways, stewardship best practices mirror fundraising best practices. So a lot of what you've learned and coached yourself on and gotten trained up on, or read in books, or maybe read in, or sort of encountered in some of these sessions around what is the best practice for fundraising, what we really mean is what is the best practice for generating emotion, generating effort, motivating action. And all of those things are very similar in stewardship as they are in fundraising. So you'll sort of see that theme play out over the next 45, 50 minutes as we go through this. When we asked you all, and so thanks again for everyone who sort of contributed beforehand, how you define stewardship, thanking a donor, right? Almost 96%, confirming gifts. Those of you doing plan giving, adding to a legacy society, adding to a giving society, cultivating donors to increase their giving. For many of you, it's special events. Obviously, the last 2 years made that a little bit more challenging. One-on-one meetings. This 73%, but probably too few, said engaging them in non-fundraising activities. So that's there. Updates on the impact of their donation, a bunch of other stuff as well. So keep that in mind here. Let's dig into some of the data on stewardship. We'll also look at some of the data in the trends around stewardship, which is a little bit unsettling. So stay tuned for that. What we realize and what we see in industry reports, et cetera, is that retaining existing donors tends to be far less expensive than acquiring new ones. If you can get a donor to give again, they're much more likely to give a third, a fourth, a fifth time. This means more gifts, more money for your organization without the added cost of acquisition. If you steward your plan giving donors effectively, research shows they will increase annual giving by 75%, right? So a lot of good things happening here. By the way, the fight between acquisition and retention shouldn't be one, because retention, if you're effectively retaining donors, then the value of an acquired donor goes way up, and you can actually spend a lot more money acquiring donors if your retention is better. And so that's a really important point. So when we think about stewardship, let's go back to the roots of why donors give. And the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy out at Indiana University. They do great work. They identify 6 motives for giving. One is trust. I trust that you are going to use my donation for the public good. 2 is altruism. I am someone who's fortunate. I am concerned for the less fortunate, right? Really sort of pure moral values. 3, social benefits. I really like to post on Instagram that, just gave $80 to the land trust. So great. Everybody liked my post, all that stuff. Or, I get to go be part of Connection. Obviously, tax benefits, especially as we get into more complex gifts. Egoism, so separate from social benefits. Egoism is, I just feel better about myself. I'm a giver. I'm a mover and shaker. Like, I make things happen in the world. That's a really good feeling. And then 6 is sometimes viewed as a negative motive, right? Financial constraints or capacity, right? So the feeling of being financially strapped or financially abundant will obviously play a really big role in giving more or less. So let's sort of keep these in mind as we go forward. As we think about why donors give, we can also start to unpack why donors don't give. And the number one reason, even though 96% of folks said they were never thanked, or said thanking was the top thing they think of as stewardship, top reason people feel like they didn't get thanked. Other reasons, they weren't asked, they weren't told what impact their donation was made, they forgot, people have busy lives, they gave to another organization and supplanted your giving. They have a change in priorities or financial situation, or they were dissatisfied with how their gift was used, right? So these are why people stop giving or don't give again. When we look at this, and there's some great work from an organization called Impact's Experience that did a lot of modeling on why donors didn't give. So what they looked at, this is for what you think was a cultural institution. So visitor-driven institution, a museum, an aquarium, a zoo, a theater, an orchestra, things like that. Top thing, not acknowledged or thanked for the previous gift. Next thing, not asked to donate again, right? Next thing, lack of communication about the use of funds or the result of gifts, impacts and outcomes. Some people just forget. Part of that forgetting is I wasn't asked to give again. Giving to another organization, changing interest priorities, et cetera. Now let's look at the last one. Asked too often, asked for too much after previous gift. Now, maybe a small factor, but let's keep in mind that is less than 1/3 of the people who say I wasn't asked to donate again. And so some people, a lot of you, have this sort of secret fear of being unlikable because you're asking for money too often. And yet what donors say is that 3 times more often, they're not giving because they're not asked enough, as opposed to being asked too much. So this is an important takeaway as you think about planning out your strategy going forward. Digging more into the data that you provided, we asked what percentage of your planned or major donors are making a gift every year. 22% said less than a quarter. Yikes, let's sort of unpack that a little bit. 8.5% said a quarter to a half. A lot of you, 17% said 50 to 75, 18% said 75 to 100%. So congratulations there. And then a bunch of folks didn't know. So you can see a broad spectrum here. And what we're seeing is, hey, some organizations are doing this a lot better than others. And that's okay. Let's make sure that we're pulling out what good looks like so we can emulate it in more and more organizations. We'll talk about what good looks like in a few minutes. When we asked you what the barriers are, what is a barrier to successful stewardship at your organization? Huge majority says not enough staff. And then the next half says we don't have a plan, right? It's actually this I would have thought this team doesn't understand the value of stewardship quite low. I would have thought that'd be higher. And I was surprised by that. But there's not enough time and lack of a plan is there as well. Also take a quick look at this 25% number. We don't have the right contact info. We're going to talk about that. This is an increasingly large problem, and we'll show you why. So what are some of the really major trends affecting stewardship? And it's always important not just to understand how things are going, but how are they different? Why are they different? Because that also, most of these trends tend to continue as opposed to just pause in a year. So as we look forward the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, a lot of these are going to continue, which means that we really need to get on top of them now because they may be important now and they're going to be extra important every year going forward. Okay, first thing is the rise in what we call unintentional anonymous giving, right? Look at this picture on the right. This person is hidden, but may or may not be intended. So there's a gift type called qualified charitable distributions. I think most of you will know what these are. These are gifts out of your IRA. You have to be at least 70 and a half or so to make one. At 72, you start getting required minimum distributions. I mean, the government says, you got to take these out. You got to take some money out. And by the way, you're going to have to pay me income tax on it. And so what we're seeing is more and more older donors are saying, oh, that's silly. I don't really need this income right now. Let me give this to charity as a way to avoid all taxes. But a quarter of nonprofits say that a lack of donor information is one of their biggest challenges around QCDs. So the way a QCD works is I call, I've got, I think I have an IRA at Vanguard or 401k, but let's say it's at Vanguard. And I call Vanguard and I say, look, I went to Georgetown, they asked me for money, and instead of cash, I want to donate out of my IRA so I can avoid a bunch of taxes. And Georgetown says, great. And they send, Vanguard says, great. And they send this directly to Georgetown. Now, one of the problems is they've grown so quickly that the banks like Vanguard are not really good at this yet. And so they just send a check to Georgetown for $1,000, $100, whatever it may be. By the way, this is in the world where I'm over 70 and a half, which I'm not. And then the check just shows up and it's just from Vanguard. And so they don't know that this is my gift. They don't know that this is my gift and I want it to go to the basketball program or undergraduate diversity scholarships or landscaping. And so it's a huge problem. These IRA custodians don't include donor info on checks. And so you have no way to thank this person. And by the way, IRA gifts are way bigger than normal cash gifts. So I may have just given you the biggest gift of my life and then crickets. And now top of the list, right? I'm not giving again because boy, no one even said thank you for this $2,000 gift, which might be a big deal for me. So let's keep that in mind. Second of all, let's talk about donor advised funds. Now, if I asked you all, what are the major trends of the last decade, the next decade in philanthropy, you'd probably say something like donor advised funds. Some of you might say the great wealth transfer. Some of you might say the rise of major donors, but we can all sort of accept that this is a huge shift. So these gifts from DAFs are rising nearly 20% a year. Nonprofits say that a fifth of them, just like QCDs, come without donor info. Donors go unthanked, they don't receive the right acknowledgements, they become angry and disillusioned. So these are the same problem, right? Same thing. Fidelity Charitable just drops a check, comes to Georgetown, so cool. Georgetown's happy to have the money, but they don't know where it came from. And especially some of these organizations, if you're the Red Cross and you're thinking about how do we allocate this money, which disaster are we urgently trying to do, you have a hard time. This is also fairly common with stock gifts. Many brokers will just drop 40 shares of Tesla in your account and don't include donor info. And then in crypto, this happens as well, where people will send money to a wallet without info. It's a huge challenge. Why is it a huge challenge? Because stocks, crypto, QCDs, donor advised funds, and bequests, frankly, are all the fastest growing types of gifts in modern philanthropy. And all of them are more likely to be anonymous than cash gifts, right? It is almost impossible to accidentally send a check that ends up as an anonymous donor, unless your name is just John Smith and they can't track it down. But remember, you used to open a check, an envelope with a check in it for $1,000, right? Great gift. And what's on a check? Name and donor address. And that's awesome. You get a blank, a check from a DAF that just says Fidelity or Vanguard or Schwab or whatever. Huge problem. And so this is really shifting. It's making the jobs of you all a lot harder. Certain demographics are more likely to give anonymously. So a couple groups are more likely to give anonymously. Wealthier folks, older generations, especially boomers and silents. Men are a little bit more likely to be anonymous than women. And these donors often give the biggest gifts. So interesting to see there. When we look at our planned gifts through FreeWill, so FreeWill is now largest estate planning tool in the United States, also by far the biggest source of planned gifts in the United States. And we look at who's sharing information with nonprofits. 60% of silents, 2/3 of boomers, 2/3 of Gen X, a little bit more of Oregon Trail millennials. These are older millennials. Zillennials, these are younger millennials, and Gen Z tend to share it at a higher rate. So interesting stuff there. It's quite possible that if you're silent generation boomer, you just had a lifetime of direct mail and you're sort of less excited to give your name out. If you're younger, you have less of that experience and you have a different relationship with mail, by the way. Anonymity in terms of cause areas. Where does this show up? Well, what you see is like religious, hold on once, let's see. Humanitarian, housing shelter, these organizations, particularly humanitarian, that are much more national, that's a really big challenge. And so, hold on one second. Actually, we're getting a doorbell ring, which is wildly surprising. So just pause. Okay, New York City apartments where the doorbell never ever rings. That was someone in maintenance. So this humanitarians, the sort of more national organizations where people have less of a personal relationship are going to be higher, and you're going to have lower on something like community and leadership, right? Where it might be in your local community, people are much more likely to share their information. Trend 2. We're seeing overall declines in donor retention across all giving levels, right? This is a really important and frankly, really damaging trend that we need to turn around. Retention is expected to be down by about 6% year over year. This is from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which I believe is associated with Giving Tuesday. It's likely a continuation of trends from the end of 2021. Retention overall in Q1 stood at 10.4%. Right? These are the number of organizations, the number of donors in Q1, which is the Q1 of this year, which is the last amount of data available. And it was about 10% of all donors were retained, meaning they gave again. Ones who gave last year gave again by the end of Q1. As a benchmark, the average donor retention rate for the whole year is 45%. So you can see this trending down pretty significantly year over year. These stats are going to be a little bit different because the studies are different, but the trends are what's really important. So Bloomerang did this study, and you can see we're dropping pretty precipitously. Now, 47% to 42%, that feels like, this is where math becomes important, because you might say, oh, that's a 4% drop. Not really, right? When you look at if you sort of take 47% as the baseline, that means that we're basically getting like 12, 15% fewer donors renewing from 2017 to 2021. And that's a huge shift. And these are all compounding, by the way, right? The donors who came back last, who were, this sort of slippery slope of things falling down. So pretty rough. Again, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project saw some increases, very slight, 2% increase in 2021, huge drop off in 2022, or early 2022. And so there's a lot of work to do this year to make this great. When we look at monthly retention compared to previous years, in 2022, pretty big drops in Q1. I mean, just really serious stuff here. Part of this is probably economic factors. Part of this is sort of, change behavior around COVID giving, but there's some other things at play too. So let's actually look at new donors, because there's new donors, right? There's new donors, there's recurring donors, and then there's lapsed donors, right? So new donors are, you gave last year, are you coming back? Ongoing donors are, you gave previous years, are you coming back? Lapsed donors are, you gave 20 years ago, are you coming back? So recapture and repeat donor retention decreasing, but even new donor retention is decreasing, and the current trend shows a reversal over the last few years. So what we see here in new donor retention rate, 21% drop year over year, repeat donor rate, 8% drop, recapture rate, again, these sort of coming back from folks who didn't give last year but may have given previously, also down. So a lot of work to do here. When we look at donor size, you see it dropping across the board, most notably among small donors, right? These are the folks who are the smallest donors are the least likely to be retained, but still small or, relatively down over supersized donors who are over 50K. So all this really matters. Retention by donation account. So the folks who've given 1 donation, 2 donations, 3 and 7+, you can see, by the way, when you get that 7+ donation, how high retention is, even with a slight shift. But this 1 and 2 donors, these are the folks that are dropping off left and right. Trend 3, the other big thing that we're seeing is when we think about, stewardship isn't just maintaining donors, it's growing donors. And there becomes a really big shift. One of the sort of most important trends we're seeing is the growth in someone's giving when they shift into non-cash gifts. So we see massive peaks here at the end of the year for planned gifts, but also for major gifts, and consistent increases year over year in people switching to non-cash gifts. Stewardship can really help change the way people give. Larger gifts, these non-cash gifts, again, super important. So here's what you see in terms of wills and trusts by week. These are really spiking around August, which is Make-A-Will month, but you can see they really go up towards the end of the year. This is going to roughly parallel planned gifts. So that's good to see. You can see stock gifts created by week, and you see how just enormous end of year giving is for stock gifts. QCDs created week by week. You can see this again. Now you see how big the spike is at the end of 21. You see how big this spike is at the end of 20. End of 19. And what happened in 20? Right? Does anyone know why QCD gifts were down in 2020? Anyone know about that? I'll give a quick moment in the chat. Yes, so Andrew Cole had it right. A couple other folks did. Basically, the government, remember I told you the government says after a certain age, you have to take money out of your IRA. They actually suspended that rule for 2020 because the markets were so down in the early part of the year. Now they swung back up pretty hard, but they did this in 2008 and did this in 2020. And so now when you see these RMDs come back, look at how big that gap is. And for all intents and purposes, we expect RMDs to be the norm going forward. Okay, so that's what we're seeing across the landscape in stewardship. Let's talk about what we actually do about it. First things first, stewardship, all of your best stewardship efforts make no impact if you don't know who the donor is. And so what we really need to do is give anonymous donors a way and a reason to share their information. One of the easiest and most impactful strategies for stewardship is to not have donors be anonymous in the first place. You can't steward these folks, you can't give them their tax receipts. And so this is, remember, the #1 reason they don't give again is they weren't thanked. And by the way, the hardest thing to do is thank someone you don't know who they are. So there are 2 big things you need to do to uncover them. The first thing is we need to fix our website. So more and more of major giving and complex gifts are happening online. The second is we need to give people a strong reason to share their information. So these are the 2 big things. First things first, for stocks, qualified charitable distributions, bequests, donor advised funds, crypto gifts, all this stuff where we're at risk of anonymous donations, we need to make sure we're collecting donor info before revealing how to give. Gift officers can follow up with in-progress gifts, closing more donations, hitting their goals. We can also thank folks to do this, right? This is super, super important. So I'll sort of walk through what that looks like in a second. And then to uncover donors who are already anonymous, make sure there's a way to notify them. This means an easy way to find gift notifications on your website. Again, don't make them call you, don't make them email you. They don't know that you need this. And so think about placing a link on some of your more trafficked pages, not just buried deep in your ways to give, your donate page, your home page, et cetera. Here's an example that we've seen. So what you can see in this middle area is a form for folks who say, I've already made a QCD gift and I need a tax acknowledgement letter. Now, this is different than a tax receipt, but we won't go into that in a moment because QCDs you're not tax deductible. You just don't pay taxes on them in the first place. But that's a longer story for a different time. What's important here is for folks who've already made a gift to be able to tell you without having to call up the office. So that is super important. When we think about giving people a reason to do so, right? You can't just say, hey, give us your info. There has to be a very clear reason why. And through a bunch of research that we've shown in some other sessions, particularly our writing focused one, we find that because is a really powerful word that drives behavior. When you ask for a favor, a donation, something else, you'll be much more successful if you provide a reason. For example, please provide your contact information because it allows us to properly thank you and acknowledge your gift. It allows us to keep you updated on our work. You may need to get a tax acknowledgement letter. So all of these things, you can't just say, hey, let us know. You have to say, let us know because this is the valuable thing for us and for you. In fact, those of you in plan giving will know that for generations, plan giving has been cursed by having just an enormous number of anonymous gifts, what people call across the transom, which means I didn't know about this plan gift until someone passed away. And when we did a bunch of research at Stanford into plan giving, what we learned is that about 20 to 25% of these gifts were notified in advance, and everything else was a total mystery, even more so for some of these large organizations that don't have personal relationships with all their donors. And so we said, okay, great, we want to crack the code on how to get people to tell charities. And we tried 7 different tests to decrease anonymity. And the winning copy, meaning the winning language for bequest, nearly doubled the percentage of donors who agreed to share their information with a nonprofit, right? So tested, no success, tested, no success, nothing, about to give up. And then one of my colleagues had this idea. And it literally doubled the number of people who said, sure, I'll, send my info to the nonprofit. And here's what we said. We said, will you make the work of nonprofits easier by letting them know who you are? Anonymous gifts may be less helpful because they often cannot be included in planned giving goals. Now, this is interesting. It's not help us accomplish the mission. It's hey, there's a bunch of people working really hard at the organization that you're trying to help. Can you make their lives a little easier? And that person-to-person question turned out to be super helpful, right? So you say, hey, don't just say it helps us, right? It helps us send you, the right acknowledgement. Hey, it helps the people in our gift fundraising office send you the right piece, right? Acknowledge that there's people behind this and not just some sort of like weird monolith, especially if you're a larger organization. So that's really helpful. By the way, we'll share the slides after, so you can, feel free to just copy this. There's no copyright on it. All right, strategy 2 in stewardship: position yourself as a guide for smart giving. Now, this is important. You are a guide for smart giving generally, and not just to your organization. So you want to keep in touch throughout the year about smart giving via IRAs, stocks, et cetera, even when not making a direct ask. Sharing resources establishes trust. That way, when they do get an ask or they look at their brokerage account or their retirement account, they will think of you. And then one of the things we really like, we like these small things that make a big difference. Using the phrase, when you talk about some of these smarter types of gifts for any of your giving, makes it much more of a service to the donor and much less of a request to you, right? Most of your donors, not all, but most of your donors are going to be also giving to their church, to their synagogue, to their alma mater, to their local community organization, on top of you, right? To some of their national organizations. Maybe they're doing some political giving as well. And so when you talk about this as, hey, I know you might be doing a bunch of giving. Let's share what's useful for all of that giving. That really lets people tune in. Okay. The other thing, when you're sharing this stuff, one of the most powerful ways to do it is using social proof. Social proof is really powerful here because people want to behave like their peers. We see that interest in leaving a bequest increases by 15% when donors believe they're one of many people doing the same thing. And sharing the best ways for other donors to give also reinforces trust, which is really, remember, that was one of the top 6 motivators for giving. So here's some example language just to see it. So, hi, Mark. I thought of you today because another longtime donor from California, right? You're a longtime donor. This is a longtime donor. You're from California. This is a person from California. Just made a gift of stock and was thrilled to save so much on her taxes while having a huge impact. Like many of our donors, again, now we're expanding it, all this whole peer group, she was surprised to learn how beneficial stock giving was for her and the impact she wants to have. I want to share this with you because I remember you mentioning how excited you were thinking about ways to be more collective with your giving. If you haven't thought about stock giving before, I hope this is helpful for you or any of your giving to our organization or elsewhere. This can help you save money and have a bigger impact on the causes you care about. Now, Mark gets this, and thinks, wow, really thoughtful this person is looking out for me, and looking out for me not just to get more gifts for, my college or whatever, right? So this really binds you and the organization much more tightly to the donor. Step 3, strategy 3. Let's talk about the warm glow. A study from Oregon wanted to see if people gave out a sense of altruism or if they gave to feel good. And each subject for $100, or was given $100, some were taxed. They said, okay, great. The money would go to food banks. They say, here's $100, but we're taking it, we're giving it to food banks. And others had the choice to donate. On average, making a choice to donate had a much stronger activation of the brain's pleasure center than taxation did, even though both of them sort of had the same impact. And so really this sort of self-feeling of that decision creates this, what we call a warm glow. And so we want to get donors back to that warm glow. Thanking donors reminds them of their choice to donate, reactivates it. And it can be especially effective for lapsed donors if they fall in the I forgot to give reason, right? We need to really reactivate that warm glow. So one tactic that we're sharing for the first time here, but we'd love for you to think about it, is what we call the time travel approach, right? So you can help your donor time travel to when they first gave and reactivate those good feelings. When did they last give? What was going on at the time? How was their donation used then, and what impact did it have? How far you've come since then with their help, right? So I'm going to show you an example now, right? Why should they give now? But we're really rooting somebody back into that moment. Anyone know what this picture is of? Sort of give people a second in the chat. Any guesses? Back to the Future 3. Yeah, so Back to the Future 3. Someone said 2, that's wrong. Back to the Future is also wrong. Back to the Future 3, when Doc and Marty end up in the Wild West. Hi, Devin. I was going through our records and I saw you made a really meaningful gift to our museum in March of 2011. March 17th to be exact. Now we'll talk for a second about specificity. Specificity plays a really big role. Thank you again for that generosity. That was certainly a different time, right? So now we're sort of placing ourselves back in 2011. Barack Obama was still in his first term. Adele had just released her first ever album. The world barely ever used video chat. I'd be curious to better understand what motivated that gift. And I'd love to share how those resources have been put to use over the years. Would you mind if I gave you a call this week, right? I mean, think about getting this email out of the blue, right? I haven't really donated to the museum in 11 years now. And suddenly sort of the thoughtfulness, the specificity, taking me back to that time, all of that really works. And so obviously you're gonna have to do some different stuff based on the year, but you can put a bunch of these together and it's not that hard. It took me 30 seconds to figure out what the top song of the year was. I think it was Someone Like You by Adele. And not that hard to figure out who the president was. And you can obviously add some local things or whatever else. So that's the time traveler approach. Strategy 4, you want to get as personal as possible in follow-ups. Obviously, hearing your own name triggers greater brain activation. We'll talk about this a lot in our writing session, but if your name is Mark or Jennifer or Michael or Rachel or Art, all of you are paying more attention to this slide now than everybody else, right? It just triggers brain activation. It is particularly true in the parts associated with social behavior and long-term memory. And this is obviously not just about name. So when we talk about personalization, especially for your larger donors, right? These are folks that are giving you, a couple $1,000 or more. What did they give? When did they give? Name the date. Hey, I was looking through our records. I remember that gift you gave on September 14th last year. I remember you talking about your favorite class, your favorite teacher, your favorite program, your favorite type of art, that's going to help. And you can send these really short updates in program areas that they've supported. People think the major donors always want reports. False. They want clear stories that move them, even if they tell you they want reports, right? People don't say, give me an anecdote over the data, but actually, we'll talk about this in a second. Anecdotes are wildly more effective than data. These are also true for lapsed or long lapsed donors. Even in things like use this as an opportunity to personalize your autoresponders, right? Sometimes I'll give $200 somewhere, and you get this auto email that says, thank you for your gift of $200. We greatly appreciate your help. The whole team at Community Center X. And it's just so weird because it's not a person. It feels very mechanical. I feel like a cog in a machine. And so on your auto-generated thank you, can it say, hi, it's Karen in the development office. Just saw your gift come through. Thanks so much. We're really excited to put this to great use. If you have any questions, here's my personal email. Right? Think about the gap between that. And the nice thing about autoresponders, you set them up once and they're just running all the time. You can offer other ways in the autoresponder to deepen connection. Hey, can you volunteer? Can you read some more reports, right? Can you make a planned gift? Is this a matching gift opportunity? All these things really go in there. But so often they're just like overly formulaic and a little bit dead. And making it more personal is going to be really valuable. Also not that hard. You guys write personal emails all the time, and everyone sort of like dresses it up like, like it sounds like 3 kids in a trench coat sometimes. All right. So in this world, think about also giving what we call an anti-annual report. So I'm not saying kill your annual report. You could if you wanted to, but the quantitative data you give in your annual report is great, but storytelling is a powerful motivator. When people hear stories of individuals rather than groups, they're more likely to donate. Presenting general stats along an individual story actually decreases gifts. Now, this research is around giving, but giving is just a proxy for feeling excited, close to an organization, right? Feeling a high degree of trust and emotion. Remember when we said all of the best practices in fundraising are the best practices in stewardship? This is a really good example. So think about something like this. When you're giving this anti-annual report, a hyper-specific story on one thing that happened, really resist the urge to say, we helped 500 students. That's awesome. But the human brain has a hard time imagining and empathizing with 500 people. Let's get specific content focusing on one individual and one positive outcome from the previous year. Ideally in a program area they supported, keep it short. I hope this makes sense. But when you think about your major donors and you're sending the whole annual report, you can even send an extra note that says, hey, sending the annual report, hope you like it. But sometimes the forest gets lost in the trees. So I wanted to tell you one story about something that you made possible that wouldn't have been helpful, wouldn't have been possible without your help, right? And then a couple paragraphs, and it will, I promise you, will make their day. Speaking of making their day, stewardship can be really helped with surprise. And so we really love this tactic called the thinking of out of the blue is particularly effective for this. Surprise creates more emotional resonance than something you can predict. It increases pleasure in a given moment, and the area of the brain associated with pleasure and reward expectation responds most strongly to unexpected events, right? So think about, when was the last time I surprised a major donor, a planned giving donor, even a coworker? We were prepping this, and over the weekend, the New York Times had this article. It's called Text Your Friends, It Matters More Than You Think. New research says most of us underestimate the power of the casual check-in. So strongly encourage reading this article. Across 13 studies, participants, meaning humans, right? Humans like us, no different, vastly underestimated how much joy would be created from a casual reach out. Now, this is interesting. The joy is stronger from weak ties as opposed to best friends. So when my mom texts me, I'm like, oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Mom, right? One of my best friends texts me, it's so great to hear from them. But for someone who's thinking of me, who I don't think of as in my tight circle of 6 people, it actually creates more surprise and more joy. Now, you are, for the most part, weak ties for your donors, right? You're not their best friend. If you are, great, congratulations, right? You're not their mom. If you are, again, congratulations. But this weak tie means that you create actually a disproportionate amount of joy compared to even their closest friends and relatives. So my homework for you, if you're up for it, today or right now, text an acquaintance or someone who's sort of in this somewhat close friend, right? Maybe a college friend you haven't talked to in a while, maybe a coworker who's since left the job and moved on elsewhere, and see how it goes. Just say, hey, I was thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. Like happy fall, right? Just do it. And Heather's texting an old friend as we speak. I thought about texting an old friend live, but I think we're a little bit short on time. But I assume it's also going to bring you some joy. But we're really curious. Maybe in 2 weeks, come back and let us know if they responded. So here's a sample language. I wrote this last night. It took me about 95 seconds to write. This is theoretical gift officer writing a theoretical donor at a children's hospital. So I wanted to drop you a note because I thought of you today. That's cool. Everyone's going to read this next paragraph. I was rushing through the children's wing today. I was late for a meeting, and I saw a teenager and her mom walking together, both beaming from ear to ear. As I walked past, they told me that for the first time in 18 months, she'd been declared cancer-free, and I started beaming too. You and Elizabeth, so theoretical Sean's spouse here, helped fund the creation of this wing 3 years ago, so I thought you'd like to hear about the specific impact you're having, and I hope it makes you smile too. Have a great day, John. Right? So this is what, 1/1000th, 1/10,000th of the effort of an annual report. And what do you think the impact is? This versus the annual report, right? So many of you said, biggest thing of stewardship is I'm too busy. Well, you could bang out 20 of these in an hour, and you would make 20 people stay. And so we're looking for things not just that are effective, but that are effective in a relatively short amount of time. Okay. Other things, I won't read all of this, but just naming that this could be a text also. Text, 100% readership rate, 100% owner rate. This is another example here around theoretical friend Joanna, real friend Joanna, but in this case, Patrick from the Land Trust, thought of you today. I was out walking and I saw this whole family just deeply enjoying the new part of the nature preserve that you help fund, right? And you go on and so forth. And by the way, if you're texting, it's really nice to be able to drop in some photos too, because the image creates a lot of emotional evocativeness. And so just more great examples. Again, just do it, right? It's not that hard. It's not that much time. And what you'll be surprised actually as you push sort of down this sort of scale, right? You do your mid-level donors, your smaller donors, as well as your major donors, how many of them are going to turn into mid-level and larger donors? So again, what is this? It feels informal. It feels personal. It's to me. It doesn't feel like it's going to 10,000 people. Even if, by the way, you send it to 10 people, that's cool. That's there. And then last thing, maybe the least exciting part of the whole session is create a donorship steward checklist, right? So you just need a plan. It's not that hard. We'll send you the checklist at the end of this call. But you want a consistent, meaningful experience, right? And make sure you're engaging folks at the right time. So you've got your donor groups, right? You've got your legacy donors, you've got your stock donors, you've got your monthly donors, et cetera. Outline your stewardship strategy, et cetera. What are you doing here? And then determine when they're going to do it, right? So you just make a plan. Doesn't have to be perfect, but a plan that you do is better than all the best plans that you don't actually do. So here's a little bit of a sample. Won't look at it too much, but all right, we got our new donors. So we're going to do a thank you or email call. New major donor, we're calling them within 48 hours from the director. Right, a welcome letter, maybe an annual lunch invite for some folks, and just have a plan, right? Who's getting holiday cards? How does that work? So all this is really important. A couple other ideas. We're low on time, so I'm going to speed through these, but you'll see them in the deck. Some other ideas for thoughtful stewardship. Somebody wrote in, children in our program are encouraged to write, color, or draw thank you notes. Some of these pieces are frame-worthy, which is really sweet. Also, it's implied that some of them are terrible, right? Some of them are not frame-worthy. But fun to see. It's a great idea there. You can imagine that sort of colored thank you note from a child is way better, probably going on the fridge or going on the wall compared to whatever cool annual report you have. A couple other ideas here, but I'm gonna skip through them so we can get some more things. Someone sends donors locally made artisanal chocolates. Things like this are really sweet. It's really sweet. The donor appreciation luncheon was a pop-up market at our office space next to a nature preserve, right? So again, you don't have to be super fancy here, but allow people to sort of see it in action. That was really cool. Habitors, which I assume is the Habitat local, takes donors on a 1 to 4 person team of communities they built, introduce them to a homeowner and volunteers. So, meeting a homeowner is, that's that one, that difference, that one person, that is different than them sitting in a conference room and reviewing the annual report. Okay. So that I made a difference for this person is going to be much more memorable than anything else. All right, some other things in here, but we're gonna skip through those. Sarah says, "Hey, that's my pop-up market." So congratulations. So cool. All right, so we're gonna share. My marketing department always really wants me to share a little bit about FreeWill. So I'll share a little bit about what American Heart Association has done with effective stewardship with FreeWill. They're a FreeWill partner. They've got a ton of new bequest donors. And so what they do is immediate follow-up on gifts. The faster they reach out, the more likely they are to hear back. Super important. They use multiple touch points, email, phone, direct mail to confirm gifts. And then every bequest donor adds them to the Legacy Society, which includes holiday cards, personal emails, things like that. So they're doing an awesome job. If you ever get a chance to go work there or learn from those folks, I would jump at the chance. Again, just a little bit more about FreeWill. We asked, what do you actually value the most? And people say some things like, our strategist, Katie, makes all these resources available to us. We feel like we've got a competent and helpful partner in the relationship with FreeWill. And then someone else says both the tools, bequest, stock, QCD, and tell us what to do about it, right? So the email schedule gives us an effective way to reach a broad population. Really love it. I love working with her. Anna's the best. So Anna's one of our strategists, and we love Anna so much here. Okay, so a couple of resources for you. My colleague June is going to drop a survey in the chat now. And if you're interested in this book, we'd love to send it to you. Make a note here. So let's do that. And then a couple of other resources. We have a whole, some content on the donor stewardship best practices that you can share with the rest of your team. And so that's really helpful. And then how to make a donor stewardship plan for your nonprofit, as well as a sample plan in case it's useful to you. So that's all there. Other things to know, if you're interested in talking with our team, we do have some best-in-class tools, particularly around this non-cash gift stuff. So the bequest tool is sort of north of $6 billion raised for charity. And then we're seeing a lot of interest from donors across the landscape, small and large, on bequests, on stock giving. These tend to be much bigger gifts. That IRA giving that we talked about a bunch, qualified charitable distributions, and actually some crypto giving as well. So we're helping people get more big gifts from millennials. And a lot of that is crypto. Who's it a good fit for? Organizations with at least $1 million in annual contributions or 5,000 email supporters. And then also we're doing some exploration on smaller organizations as well. So if you want to chat about that, let us know. That could be really good. Excuse me. So with that, we are going to sort of skip all this stuff. I am going to take a quick look at the survey question, or the questions that you all put on. Maybe before we do that, actually, we'll just note that our next session is October 11th at noon. And what we're going to do then is we're going to dive deeply into some plan giving research and really look at the way that people are giving, who's giving, how much, to whom. We have a plan giving report coming out that is really sort of like the best thing in the industry in terms of really actionable data and some deep understanding there. So that's that. We'd love to see you on October 11th. If you need anything at all, just shoot me an email at patrick@freewill.com. You can also, a lot of people connect me on LinkedIn. It's a really helpful way to sort of have conversations as well. So feel free to do that as well. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And we are going to, let's see how to get that out of here. We'll answer some of the big questions. So let's do that. So we see some questions coming in. Paige, how often is too often? This is really interesting. It is almost certainly more than you're currently doing. So we'll name that. When you get into political campaigning, those people have sort of less concern about unsubscribes because election day is coming. They will frequently email every day. Now, I wouldn't say that, but it's really as often as you have valuable things to share. So if you've got big updates, if you've got cool things to share, do it. If all you're doing is sending the exact same email 40 times, it's probably too much. And so just think about, is each individual thing of value as opposed to 3 times a week or 2 times a week or 4 times a month. But I would say, at minimum, twice a month, if you're a smaller organization, 4 times a month, if you're larger, is more than fine. Question for y'all. Heather says, do you feel like stewardship is also done by fundraisers or just with donor relations? Strongly suggest it's done with fundraisers as well. So what we see is, fundraisers, if you are the one who's going to be asking for the next gift, you better be doing the thinking, right? You better be that person who's being that thoughtful guide, who's helping them understand the role, the impact. It's just hugely important. You can do that alongside a donor relations person, right? If they want to draft the email, but it's gotta be part of the fundraiser. Otherwise, you're just coming in once a year asking for money and everyone, and otherwise there's no relationship. That's not a good look. It's a great question. Tessa says, in the event of a QCD or a DAF without a name, could you do a shout out in group communication? Something like, we received a big donation, we don't know who to thank. Tessa, this is really interesting, Tessa. If you are a church, right, where you're in a tight community, if you are a small nonprofit where you're going to talk to 20 donors and one of them is going to be it. If you're St. Jude's, it's going to be really tough to send that email out. Say, okay, who just gave us $400,000 in a DAF? And you might even get some sort of nonsense answers there. So that's pretty tough. You really want to, avoid that problem before it goes instead of trying to fix it on the back end. Okay, last question. Alex says, for the time traveler email idea, what would you suggest as a subject line? I would say something like, thank you again for what you did in 2011, right? Imagine getting that email. You're like, oh my God, what did I do? Some of us who are raised Catholic have a guilty conscience about anything that would show up like that. But, sort of like, thank you for what you did in 2011. A quick note about something you did in 2011, like that. Think about just putting that in your own email box and what reaction you would get. It's really going to sort of jump out at somebody. It's really thoughtful. Someone who's thoughtful about your past, on top of just whatever you can do for them right now, is just really stands out. And so try that as well. Okay, so we will wrap up there. We're 2 minutes to 1 on the East Coast. If you haven't already, please click that link that June just pasted in the chat. And then for everyone else, just a huge thank you for joining, for pushing yourself to learn more about this. Stewardship is just of unbelievable importance to your organization and hopefully to your career as well. And so hopefully this was a bit helpful there. As always, if there's anything we can be doing better, just let us know, and hope to see you in a few weeks. And we'll really dive into planned giving, which, almost certainly the most important type of giving over the next 10 years. So we'll dive in there, and it's just really wonderful to see you all as usual. Take care and have a great week.